afternoon. It's fantastic to welcome you here, Wendy. Wendy is MP for North East Fife, and you've been a fine, kind of keen 50-50 supporter for so many years. I can't thank you enough for that, carrying our bag on the campaign trail and
Absolutely.
Things like this. I so appreciate it. So I guess my first question is, when did you hear about 50-50? For the first time?
So I came into politics quite late in that I joined the Liberal Democrats in 2015. I always sort of joke crying at Nick Clegg on the telly. And up until about 2017, I was, an activist who knocked doors and delivered leaflets, but had never really thought about myself as a candidate. And then I think really it all sort of started once I was starting to think seriously becoming a candidate, having been asked to stand. So I think I attended an elector event in the Scottish Parliament, and I think it was all through that. That was the first time I'd heard. And in terms of my 50-50 bag, I can't remember where I got it from, but I do remember having it very strongly in the campaign trail. And in fact, I think a couple of journalists picked it up because having been elected in 2019 to North East Fife, I am the first woman to be elected in that seat. And I always joke that one of my predecessors, Liberal predecessors, is Herbert Asquith, and obviously he wasn't so supportive of female suffrage, but hopefully he's quite happy that the seat's in Liberal hands again.
Well, that would be a good one for him anyway, wouldn't it? I'd love to know, what is it that you like about your job, and has it met your expectations being an elected representative in the mother of parliaments? I
mean, it's interesting. People ask me, do you like your job? And I say genuinely, it is the best job I've ever had. And I think seriously, if you don't think that, you should probably question whether you're in the right job or not, because you have to be passionate about it. It's incredibly hard work. The hours are long. I'm obviously a Scottish MP who's away from my family during the week, and that's difficult and challenging. But the privilege of sitting in Parliament and speaking on behalf of your constituents is very powerful. But actually that direct help and support that you can give to constituents. It's interesting, I was elected in December 2019, and I was literally hiring my last members of staff as the pandemic, as we went into lockdown, giving a member of staff a laptop saying, I don't know when I'll see you again. And I hesitate to use the word good thing about the pandemic because so much of it was so awful, but people who would never have thought of getting in touch with their MP or elected representatives did during COVID, and we were able to help and support. And if that developed a better understanding of what your elected representative could do for you, I think that is a very good thing, particularly at a time when political engagement is more difficult and challenging and diverse and sometimes more depressing than it should be.
And on that point, how were you able to represent your constituents at Westminster during COVID?
Well, obviously during the first lockdown, I was at home like everybody else. I do remember doing one meeting on my son's gaming chair, on his desk where his PlayStation was, just because we were obviously, like many families, kind of trying to juggle. But that's where the benefits of, communication comes into play in terms of social media. And we got our phone lines diverted pretty quickly onto mobile phones as a team, so people could contact us there, and plus emails. We're just about, the workload varies, I think, quite dramatically between different offices and the engagement, I suppose, that people have. But as a Scottish MP, obviously MSPs, a lot of legislative areas are devolved, but we're just about to hit 20,000 cases in just under 4 years, which is can be everything through to sort of more campaign emails, even people like 50-50 writing in terms of supporting a better diverse representation, but also those really quite serious benefits immigration cases that can take a long time to work through.
So you've got around 20,000 cases that you're dealing with at the minute.
Well, that's how many we've had since we've been elected.
Okay.
So some of them will have been, many of them will have been resolved.
You've dealt with, yeah.
And people will come back to you again. And so having that visibility and being seen, and also that's probably, how you do it in terms of engaging with your constituents, what we're doing. I'm a Liberal Democrat. We deliver a lot of literature in our constituencies, but part of that is because, we don't, the air war is much more difficult for us. So it's really important that we tell our constituents directly what we're doing and how we're representing them.
I guess the point I was trying to make was we had a virtual parliament during COVID, didn't we? Did you find as an MP a Scottish MP, that there was some benefits in a virtual parliament. Do you think that it's possible for a democracy to harness new technology?
Yeah. I think it is really difficult because, again, I think about my own situation as a Scottish MP. I come down on a Monday, I go home on a Thursday. Now, part of that is because of my whipping role. And in some ways, I want to cram everything in when I'm down here and just do as much work as possible. Whereas obviously you'll have London or sort of South East MPs who ideally would want to get back for, bedtime or childcare responsibilities, or indeed constituency events, because they can then do those. So how do you find that balance? I think there was great things about the virtual parliament that allowed people to contribute, but I think there were negatives as well. If I think about that 2019 cohort and I think about the divisive nature of our politics, I wonder if some of that came about because we were all in our own echo chambers.
Right.
And so those conversations and engagements that you might have had at a drop-in event or, the members' tea room, where you make those connections, were more difficult and more challenging. And I think that's been, particularly that cross-party stuff, I think that's been one of the downsides. I suppose the other aspect around it is, what is a debate? I think increasingly it feels like when people speak in Parliament, we're fixed in our positions. How do you listen, engage with that debate and respond? And I suppose one of the issues with the virtual parliament was you were giving your 3-minute speech to a camera. There was no interventions.
Right.
How do you ensure that you properly sort of demonstrate that you have listened and engaged with the arguments that have come from elsewhere? But around proxy voting, in terms of, maybe a more hybrid nature in terms of how people contribute, I think those kind of things we definitely should be picking up. And we should just be thinking about the place. Parliament, obviously the restoration issues are, ongoing and being debated, but it's not a place that's particularly encouraging for different diversities such as disabilities, etc. I mean, I climb a lot of stairs and do a lot of steps on a daily basis, and I joke that it's good for my fitness, but how does that work for others? It must be quite challenging.
So tell me, Wendy, what do you really like about your job? What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning and makes you want to come into Westminster?
I think particularly my constituency days, getting out and about, meeting people. It's a privilege to represent North East Fife. It's a beautiful constituency and area, and the people in it are fantastic. But the other aspect is the team. So I've got 2 teams. I've got my team in North East Fife, who do my casework. They're the people in the office that are answering the phones, dealing with that variety of issues. And then I've also got my whips team in Westminster as well, who are helping and supporting with the engagement there. And the secret to doing this job well is to hire really good people who are cleverer than you and make you look good. And when you hire and enthuse those type of people, every day is a pleasure, because you feel like you're working towards something really important. And when I think about some of the things that I have as an opposition MP in a party of over only 15 been able to deliver, I took a private member's bill through in the last session of Parliament, which will be the Carers Leave Act that comes in April next year, which gives unpaid carers for the very first time an employment right, something they've never had before. And secondly, on standards, I am the whip. I'm an ex-police officer who used to work in HR. I mean, you can see how all these things come together, but there's absolutely no doubt that the standards in our Parliament and the behaviour of some colleagues has been very rightly in the spotlight, and we need to change that culture. So one of the things that I have been able to do as a result of the Owen Patterson situation 2 years ago, in relation to standards and conduct, when a report about a member now comes to the floor of the House, that member can't vote in relation to their own sanction, because that's what happened in the Owen Patterson situation. He was actually able to vote against his own sanction. And so for me, that felt like this is a person who is a defendant in some respects, but gets to be the jury as well. And that just didn't feel right to me. So I'm very pleased that I was able to take forward that amendment on a cross-party basis and get it passed, because I think we have to demonstrate, all MPs, that we are serious about the standards that we want to uphold, because behaviours, poor behaviours, criminal behaviours reflect badly on all of us. And from a 50-50 Parliament perspective, make women look at Parliament and think that's not a place that I want to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thanks then for working so hard on that. And so why do you think women should stand? Why do we need more of them sort of helping make laws on the economy or defence?
Well, because I think back to my time as a police officer and what we want from our police service, in that we want a police service to look like the communities it serves. And so I think Parliament should be treated exactly the same way. We want it to look like the communities that we seek to represent. And women make up a proportion of that.
The majority.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well as that, it's really important. The reason why you want that diversity, and my last job before I came into politics was in the private sector, was that acceptance that seems very prevalent in the private sector, that if you want good, better decision making, you need to listen and hear from different voices and get different representation. And so that's important in Parliament as well. You know, where we are just now is we're in the early stages of the COVID inquiry, and we're talking about the groups of people who just weren't thought about in relation to a government response. And I think part of that came about because the people making the decisions all looked, sounded, acted similarly, and potentially if we'd had different voices in that room, different opportunities, we'd have had different outcomes.
Absolutely. Representation shapes policy. And so coming to Ask Her to Stand Day, which is the 21st of November, and our Ask Her to Stand campaign, why do you think campaigns like this are important?
Because I think they give people a nudge. There is no way I would be sitting here today if it wasn't for the fact that somebody asked me to stand. And that person was Willie Rennie, who is my MSP constituency colleague, but was leader of the Scottish Party then. And that came about because he thought of me, which was very good, but also because in my party, we had adopted an all-women shortlist approach for target seats. So that North East Fife being a target seat as it was in 2017 made him think, I need to reach out to women. And I mean, I would like to think he'd have still thought of me, but I think that gives that additional nudge. And so 2017 for me was, I did apply for that selection. Although I didn't win the selection for North East Fife, it then stood me in very good stead to be selected the following year to then win the seat in 2019. And so, you know, it also gave me the opportunity, that general election in 2017, to actually find out whether this was something I really wanted to do seriously. I stood in a seat that wasn't a target for us, and just really allowed me to make that assessment and work out whether it would be right for me. So I think that's the other sort of message, that asking to stand, yes, it's important to represent your local community, and we should be, you know, encouraging people to do that. But there is also just giving people that opportunity to make that assessment of what's right for them. Because, you know, being an MP is one way that you can represent their community. There's lots of other ways to do that. And I feel very strongly that at local authority level, council level, that actually that is where we really need to address some of our diversity issues, because we have local authorities have so much. If I think about my casework, so much of it is for local authorities, but I think we don't have the diversity we need at local council level, because frankly we don't pay councillors enough, we don't respect, you know, we don't take seriously the job that they do, and as a result we end up with, you know, frankly, retired people doing it because basically somebody couldn't afford to do that as their job. And as a result, we have then more challenges around diversity as well, because it's not just, as we know, about gender.
Interesting. We are running a campaign at the minute with the local government association called Be a Councillor. So that's just launched yesterday, and it's sort of going big over the next sort of 3 months. So I could absolutely agree with you. And what I also love about your story is the fact that your persistence paid off. You know, you can't just try once, you've got to try again. And yeah, and
I think I was you know, if I had been selected as the candidate in 2017 and it became the most arduous seat in the UK, so only 2 votes. So say if that flipped the other way and I'd been elected in 2017, I think it would have been really challenging. I mean, it was obviously really challenging 2019 too, but I definitely think that when it came to it, I was a better candidate for having gone through that experience and not been successful.
Right.
Because I had gone away and learned and got involved locally with the party and worked really hard during that 2017 campaign, which meant that I was better equipped to be a candidate and a leader, because you are as a candidate in 2019.
So learn how to lose.
Yeah.
And I think it was Emmeline
I'm a Lib
Pankhurst.
Dem.
Learn how to lose. And I think it was Emmeline Pankhurst that said, never give up.
Yes.
You know, you've just got to keep going at it.
There's so much you can learn from campaigns where you lose. And it's about those building blocks to then being successful.
And don't think less of yourself. It's all good experience. Fantastic. And how important do you think allyship is? The allyship of men in helping us campaign for a better democracy.
It's incredibly important allyship because if men don't see better representation as an issue, well, we're kind of stuffed, aren't we? We need to be seen as, well, as you said, women make up the majority of the population in the UK. So this needs to be seen as something that we want to address. Everybody wants to address rather than just women. So it's incredibly important. And, I always, it's interesting, I think my first International Women's Day, I thanked Willie because, I wouldn't be here, as I say, if it wasn't for him. And that's why it's so important that not just, MPs generally, but leaders in parties show that they're allies too.
Yes, I mean, my concern about it is if Parliament or democracy is inaccessible to women, or if women aren't attracted to it, then there's a problem. And we need to ask, why is it inaccessible and why aren't they attracted to it? Because if they're not attracted to it, then there's probably a whole load of great people out there who aren't attracted. So it's really important to address these kind of issues. So it's really great to hear all the kind of work that you've been doing regarding standards. We want to build a better organisation. So looking forward, what do you think we can all do to try and encourage women to stand? And when do you think we might get gender balance in Parliament? Because on the basis of the last election, when only 12 extra women were elected, it's going to take till 2060. I'll be dead, my kids will be old, and that's just too long to wait.
Yeah, no. I think there's still a lot more to do, and this is where it ties in for me around standards, because I do think the parties themselves need to do more and commit to do more in relation to having a more diverse Parliament and selecting appropriate candidates in the first place. So that due diligence needs to happen. But I think, part of the challenge is the turnover of Parliament in terms of, how many MPs are stepping down and where are the opportunities. And I suppose this is where it comes back to, and I know it's not related to 50-50 Parliament, but I do think that our voting system is one of the challenges here, where we end up with safe seats where an incumbent sits for a long period of time and there's not the opportunity for change or development or so for me, if we had electoral reform, I think you would see an increased diversity, and I would, point to the Scottish Parliament in that regard, where the AMS system, we have seen increased numbers of women MSPs, and that's very good.
Yes, absolutely. No, I think there's plenty of evidence that proportional representation leads to better gender balance and improved diversity in elected bodies.
And might help with some of the challenges in terms of doing the job. Because if you're looking at an electoral reform system where you've got, a multi-member constituency, then you're not trying to do everything.
I think that's all the questions I had to ask. Okay. That's a lousy end. Really, Wendy, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for giving us such a frank, interview. And thank you so much for all your sort of continued support for our campaign. I really feel it
Thank you,
through
Frances.
the airwaves.
You've kept this issue front and centre, and it's quite clear that, we can't let up on it. So thank you for all you do, and the team do too.
Thank you very much.